So there's this band I discovered in the last year or two called the Psychic Circle, and they have some of the best psychedelic sounds like it should be in an obscure 70s giallo movie music that I've ever heard. In fact, the entire label that they're a part of, Library of the Occult, contains a lot of these kinds of artists, so big shout out to them. Anyways, music like that has this kind of vibe to it, like I should be sitting in my patchouli-soaked living room, bathed in the light of lava lamps and vintage oil rain lamps and whatever other kind of soft ambient retro lighting existed back then, cross-legged on a plush shag carpet, high out of my mind on mushrooms or something, with a group of fellow cultists just waiting to be swallowed whole by the abyss that we so desire to be a part of, for our entire existence is defined by the larger sum of what we could be. Wait, what? I'm getting out of control here. What I'm getting at by bringing up the Psychic Circle is that this new horror game from developers Brass Token called the Chant kind of has the same vibe of everything I just mentioned, right down to some of the soundtrack betting that your ears are blessed with while playing this game, which is sick. As a person who predominantly plays games for the story, the Chant had something fun and different to offer that satisfied my desire for an experience that I couldn't quite articulate with words. Does that sound like I'm ready to join a cult? Probably, but let's get into the opinion before I pledge my undying loyalty and firstborn to the abyss. The Chant might be Brass Token's first game, but I would kind of imagine their roster is filled with some passionate individuals who might also have experience in the game dev industry, and I say this because it comes through in the game as you play it. The Chant is a survival horror akin to something like Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, which is a bold name drop given that I still have yet to play it.
How dare you!
But the cosmic entity themes in the plot, mixed with the balancing act of mind, health, and spirit mechanics, like sanity in Eternal Darkness, mixed with some of the staple puzzle solving and item combination aspects of most survival horror games, well, makes me feel like I'm not too far off the mark with this assumption, but I digress. The Chant brings something cool to the survival horror genre that I feel it needed, which is a bit of variety to what feels like a constant rehashing of the same military-based science fiction with zombies and mutants that we know oh so well from, well, the game starts off with a chase sequence that runs you through the basic movement and combat stuff, as you're a pregnant woman running from some kind of danger. What kind of danger? The dangerous kind of danger. Eventually you reach a cliff where you jump off, fall into the water, and that's the end of the game. Congratulations, you've beaten the Chant! How does it feel? Oh my god, thank you. It feels great. I'd like to thank my parents and my supportive boyfriend for being with me throughout this whole tough process, my audience, and Brass Token for creating this masterpiece of modern entertainment. Except that's not at all how that goes down. This is just the end of the tutorial, and you're thrust into the main story after this. Oof. At this point, I should bring up the fact that while this game is memorable and I deeply enjoyed it, I also could not for the life of me remember the name of the main character that you play as, which is typical. And as I sat writing out the opinion notes for this video, I sighed out loud. My significant other sitting next to me on the couch asked me what was wrong, and I explained to him as I sat and stared at the screenshot of this main character, desperately trying to Google the name of the cast to figure out the name that I couldn't remember. He took a look at the screenshot of the character and he goes,
"Well, that's totally a Jessica, look at her."
And he was right. Her name is Jessica Breyer. So anyways, you play as Jessica Breyer, who is visiting this remote island retreat with her friend Kim, who swears up and down that this isn't a cult, and then follows it up with, "Come on, Total Jessica, let's go get your all-white clothes made from special reserve hemp that we locally source here on our not cult island," and then we're kind of off to the races. You meet the cast of characters on this weird island after that, and you're asked to gather ingredients for a special tea that is definitely not for a psychedelic cult ritual where you're opening up your third eye and your chakras and inviting in some kind of shit that you probably don't want to have over for cookies and milk in the first place. The plot is definitely pulpy and rife with tropes, but it's simplistic and it's enjoyable, and there's nothing wrong with that. Plus, again, I think there's enough games out there trying to replicate the Resident Evil formula, many of which I also enjoy, but what I'm saying here is that there's room for what the Chant is offering with its plot, and that isn't all. Upon starting the game, you're given 3 different difficulty options. I had a rough week, so I chose the easy story difficulty. I don't really care about the struggle, okay? But I like that the options are there. It gives room for replayability and immediately offers accessibility for people like me who don't necessarily want or care about the challenge, or for others who do want the challenge and wish to play it on the hardest difficulty ever. That seems like a masochistic dream, by the way. Combat can occasionally be a little frustrating, but I think that's generally the struggle of most combat, and it's kind of redundant to say it. I don't know. Anyways, you're not sporting guns or lasers or anything that you're used to in an action sequence of a game of this type. Instead, you're fighting off monsters with supply supplies you might acquire at like a Michael's or a Joanne Crafts, or in this case, just your natural cult wood surroundings. Didn't think you could fight off cosmic horrors with sage, fiery twigs, and essential oils, did ya? Think again. You're using all of those things to craft various natural weaponry like your Gwyneth Paltrow making new candles for rich people with disposable income. You also level up 3 main statistics: mind, body, and spirit. You heal with yoga. You gain new supernatural powers with crystals or prisms, which makes some sense because not only is this just a twisted version of holistic therapy, but you're in a cult that follows the teachings of something called the Prismatic Order. Something that you learn more about as you progress through the plot and, more importantly, discover lore that is scattered across the island's lush terrain. It is definitely familiar gameplay territory to anyone who loves the survival horror genre, but it's different enough to be charming and fun, and I honestly enjoyed it from start to finish. Do I have any gripes? Maybe, but they seem kind of superficial and trite. Sometimes boss encounters felt too difficult, even on easy, but I chalked that up to the mood I was in. And in a lot of cases, personally, I chalk that up in any game to my initial reluctance to recognize the game mechanics that have been taught to me, and instead going for the smooth-brained multiple attempts at hitting hard may die. So therefore, I can't really say the boss encounters were difficult at all. They were actually pretty balanced and clever. A couple of times I felt like I got lost because of how dark everything was, but again, turn up the brightness, moron. God, were I to say anything negative about the Chant, I would maybe say that some of the combat felt at times a little clunky and lacking in general interest. What does that mean? General interest? I don't know. There was a lot of attention to detail throughout the game that I really appreciated. Little things like actual animations for lock openings, smooth transitions with doors and conversation flow from scene to scene, general conversation not being interrupted by my movement or my interaction with something simple like a note laying on a table. So to that end, maybe the combat having that same kind of flow with a finishing move or two or like a parry. Holy shit, did she just say the game needed refined parrying? The streamer that refuses to parry anything? Oh my god. Or some kind of crit animation? I don't know. I did appreciate that sometimes if you didn't perfectly time a dodge, you stumbled rather than parried. I actually really enjoyed that a lot because it added a lot of sense of vulnerability and confusion that you felt for the all-around situation that you were in, which I have barely even mentioned, by the way. But in all honesty, before I brush upon that, if I had anything negative to offer about the Chant, it's that combat occasionally felt stale if you had to do too much of it. And I could see that being frustrating on harder difficulties or for people who actively want the combat mechanics over the story in the Chant. It's something to think about for sure. Puzzles are also an occasional gameplay mechanic introduced into the Chant as well, but none of them are particularly challenging enough to present a lot of delay to pacing, which is kind of nice. Sometimes an obscure puzzle takes things too far into the territory of monotonous, and I appreciated that the Chant was aware enough to not really go there. The balance of these mechanics truly felt pretty on point, and again, I don't really have anything bad to say about them. Now, about this story. I don't want to spoil too much of it because while it's likely something you're going to predict from start to finish, it's still a really fun ride to endure and genuinely feels like you're playing an interactive, pulpy 70s cult horror movie. I almost wish that some of that would have been overblown even more for the sake of sheer camp, but I appreciate the subtlety presented and I can't fault it for erring on the side of caution. I think it's better to do that than to try too hard and fail even harder in the process. The Chant's plot kept me pretty engaged throughout the entire runtime, and it kind of left me wanting more. And there are multiple endings, which gives me a chance to potentially replay it with a different style down the road.
Cool.
There wasn't a large cast of characters to keep up with, which is nice, but I didn't find myself really caring that much about, any of them. Well, maybe Hannah. Anyway, I don't need a strong attachment to game characters for a game to be enjoyable, so it's more so a minor note to a larger picture. Overall, I think the Chant will stand the test of time and become a cult favorite as it ages. Get it? 'Cause cult, you know? Okay, I'll stop. But seriously, the Chant definitely has a vibe that I'm feeling, and I would love to see more of. Not necessarily in a sequel. I think the story stands fine on its own, though I won't object if Brass Token does make a sequel to this delightful experience. But what I'm saying, however, is that the Chant is a fun survival horror experience that is unique unto itself. The Chant is available now on PC, PlayStation 5, and the Xbox Series X and S. Check out the links below to support the channel. And, as always, thanks for watching. I'm live 5 days a week on Twitch, though I may be branching out more on YouTube and TikTok as well. I guess if any of that sounds appealing, check out my socials and give me a follow. Till next time.